Baffle part's one, right?
Okay, so you know that everything about commercial item purchases is in FAR Part 12, so you can continue to flip through that at your leisure. I want to talk about Uniform Commercial Code and FAR because this is really where the two of them bump up against each other. Remembering that the federal acquisition regulations is everything designed to protect the government in procurements and in contracting, whereas the Uniform Commercial Code is the body of law that governs transactions between two commercial entities. So every contract, subcontract that you have with suppliers or that other companies have with you as a supplier is all governed by the UCC. Anything you do with the federal government is governed by the FAR, and as you heard from General Dynamics, they flow those clauses down to subcontractors as part of the subcontract. Okay. So when we talk about the Uniform Commercial Code, it's primarily to provide, think of it as more general guidance, and it basically covers all phases of a commercial transaction. So it covers how do you put a contract in place, it covers payment, it covers performance, and what happens if one party fails to perform, it covers shipping and storage, security, not to the same level that the government's now getting into with regard to cybersecurity. It talks about collateral for unpaid balances and letters of credit. So it's a much more general set of rules than what the FAR is. The general legal guidance applies when specific contract terms and conditions are absent. So basically what this is if two business people get together in a bar and put together a contract on the back of a napkin, the Uniform Commercial Code is what fills in all the gaps, right? So, you know, two commercial companies, as they get better and better with dealing with other commercial companies, write up their terms and conditions, and they have standard contracts. You'll notice when you work with people, they'll typically give you their standard contract, or you'll give them your standard contract, and you use that as a basis of negotiation, right? You send it back to them with any comments that you want to take exception to or that you want the wording changed, and you send it over to them. They either agree to your changes or suggest alternate wording, and then send it back to you, and it's this give and take until you get to a point of negotiation. So the Uniform Commercial Code is what governs that process. The purpose is to simplify, clarify, and modernize laws for commercial transactions. If you had a whole bunch of different sets of commercial laws out there, and you did business across state lines, you wouldn't have a common body of law to govern the transactions between different organizations. So that's basically to get everybody on the same sheet of music. It permits the continued expansion of commercial practices through custom usage and agreement by the parties. So kind of once you get your head wrapped around the UCC, you can use that same body of knowledge to help you in all your commercial transactions. And then finally, it makes, obviously, law uniform among various jurisdictions, because otherwise you spend a lot of time trying to figure this stuff out, where this gives you sort of a template, if you will, for conducting business. So just some of the primary differences between the FAR and the UCC. As you look through the FAR, you've seen that it's very specific guidance, right? When you read your sections, did you get a really clear sense of what you were supposed to do to be compliant? Yeah, very, very specific and very detailed. And the government has created that over a long period of time because they've had so many transactions that they've had issues on that they've had to get resolved, and they've done that through the FAR. But the rules are very specific to the federal government, and they're biased towards the federal government, which means the federal government usually wins. I'm not saying that they win all protests or all appeals. What I'm saying is that the body of law is slanted towards the federal government. And that's what the FAR is. It's a very one-sided, if you will, type of transaction, one-sided body of law. Now, the government doesn't exercise that. In other words, they don't try to be the big bully in the room because they need all of us as suppliers to the industrial base. If they don't have us, they can't do their jobs. No president is going to allow the government to get so big that it can do everything that we as contractors are doing today. You know, some presidents have tried, but you know, every administration is different, right? So you have some that try to expand the government to allow government employees to do all the work, and you've had others that have contracted meaning smaller, the government to bring in more of the contractor base. So either way the work has to get done, you just figure out who's doing it. So FAR is definitely biased towards the government. In the UCC, it's not biased towards the buyer or the seller. It protects both of them equally. But it's much more general. It's not as specific as the FAR. The FAR is very structured and formal. And if you notice, you know, the first week we talked about the Uniform Commercial Code, the Uniform Contract Format, where we said this is sections A through N. Most agencies follow that. And quite honestly, it's a great process to follow. Because if you notice, it covers everything you would need to know as a contractor to be able to price a deal to the government. When we work with commercial counterparts, much more loosey-goosey, right? I always say if you can make it in the federal government, you can make it anywhere. Because it's so strict and so regimented, but yet it's good, solid contracting principles. Where do those good, solid contracting principles come from? DoD for the most part. And DoD has really taken that responsibility seriously. And so you see their thumbprint on pretty much everything we have in today's FAR as well as the FAR. The UCC doesn't require that degree of formality. You can be much more loose. As I mentioned, maybe you've done it yourself. You've written contracts on the back. I promise to do this, and here's the price. I'm not recommending it, but think about all the problems that causes. Well, when do you want me to deliver this? What do you consider a late payment? What do you consider? A whole lot of differences in perspective when you don't clearly define all that stuff. You never have that problem typically on government contracts because everything is very specified. The FAR provides the government with unilateral rights. What does that mean? I'm the government, I'm telling you you have to do this. Just like General Dynamics said today. The government said to General Dynamics, I want you to pay attention to cybersecurity, and by God, we're all paying attention to cybersecurity. Right? So that's a unilateral right. They didn't take a poll of all the contractors and say, hey, how do you guys feel about cybersecurity? You think we should do this? What are your thoughts? Not that they don't ask for industry involvement in terms of how is this going to impact you so that they can understand what your needs are, but when the game is done, we're all implementing cybersecurity policies. That's unilateral. The government's telling you what to do. They don't do that very often, just so you know. Again, they need us, so if they take us all off, we're all going to go home. So they don't do it unless they absolutely have to. Obviously, when we've got so many foreign national governments trying to penetrate our systems, the government has to do something about cybersecurity. So that's why it gets imposed on us. But it's usually that level of importance. I'm sorry?
Nothing.
Oh.
I
Making a
said,
joke
I said this
earlier.
all started because Hillary didn't get elected.
There's no unilateral rights. Everything, and you see, there's the buyer or the seller, neither one of them have any unilateral rights. The buyer can't tell the seller to do something, the seller can't tell the buyer to do something. Everything has to be a negotiated or a bilateral agreement. So you both have to enter in, you both have to have discussions and figure out what works for you, what works for me, and we figure out where to go from there. Let's talk a little bit about inspection and acceptance. So there are some government programs that you could provide, you have a little bit of variance in what you provide. So if I asked for green pens and you did your green pen with black ink on it for the description, and if one of your vendors or one of your competitors did it with white ink, that's not a difference to me, right? I don't care. I can live with that variance because it really doesn't impact the form and functionality of the pen. But if you start talking about O-rings on the Challenger, guess what? We have a different issue. It has, when we're talking about NASA, the CIA, the DIA, the FBI, all these organizations that are involved in law enforcement and protecting our citizens, things have to be very, very specific and exact. So the amount of variance that the government allows on a contract drives what your price is. If you can be kind of loosey-goosey and some days I'll print this black and some days I'll print this white, that's a degree of variance that the government is allowing you to have. But at other times, they might have a specification to the 0.99% accuracy, in which case you have to comply with that. So the government then had two choices if they were going to make those really high standards and specifications. They could, the traditional way of doing it is pretty much, I'm the government, I don't trust you to meet these specifications, I'm going to come in and watch over your shoulder. And I want to see your manufacturing process, and I want to check at each stage of the game whether or not you're being compliant. And I want to be able to test your products periodically to make sure that they're falling within the very, very small variance that I have established for this contract. Because I don't want you to get all the way down the line and produce something that I can't use because you haven't met the quality standards along the way. So the government used to send their own people into your organizations and inspect. And they wouldn't inspect. The sort of the basic rule of thumb was they couldn't stop your manufacturing process and say, okay, I want to stop everything, I want to pick this one off and go inspect it. But like say for example, if you had a bunch of these pens, this part and this part being produced separately, and all these were thrown into a bin until all these were made so that they could actually be inserted on top, the government could go over to that bin, pick one out, and do an inspection on it. Think about the cost to the government when that happens. They have to hire inspectors, they have to get them all trained up on the standard, they have to have a travel budget to get out to your location, they have to schedule time with you, so they're going to have downtime because it's not convenient for you. They have to physically come in and conduct the inspection. Everything the government does requires some report, and that report has to go through approval chains. So you see how much overhead for the government is associated with inspection. And it's not like they can say, okay, well, guess what, we don't care about standards anymore. We still care about you providing these exact products. But what the government did with commercial items was they shifted the burden of responsibility for inspection onto the contractors. Contractors, you're commercial companies, you deal with commercial entities, you have to be pretty good in your line of work, otherwise companies aren't going to come to you. In order to be pretty good in your line of work, you need to have quality product. You shoulder the responsibility for the expense of this. And you have your own people at various portions throughout the contract, or throughout the production process, and you conduct these tests, just as your normal course of doing business. So when the government shifted to commercial items, they basically stipulated, before commercial items, the government stipulated how and when audits were going to be done, how and when inspections were going to be done. After commercial items, now the government relies on you to make sure you keep your standard. So you heard how important for General Dynamics when they said, pay attention to the quality standards, pay attention to the quality certifications. You know, the program that Jen Edge and Stephanie are putting on starting next week, Six Sigma, Lean Six Sigma, Black Belt. That is like the highest quality standard you can get. And what it does is it requires you to look at your manufacturing lines and see, are you operating, are you doing things in the most efficient manner? Are you getting rid of all the, they call it MUDA, all the things that get in your way? Like for example, this is a MUDA nightmare, right? Because what can happen? I come to talk to Jared and boom, right? Probably even stick like here, boom. Because I am that talented. But that's an example of, if that was fixed, there would be no chance of people getting hurt. Right now, high chance of people getting hurt. Not even thinking about it. So this whole idea of Six Sigma is to get all this trash out of your organizations, all this ineffective processes, all this ineffective work that's being done. Maybe somebody 3 generations ago said, oh, you know what, I need a status report every Tuesday morning that tells me blah, 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 blah. And what you've come to find out is nobody's looking at the status report anymore. Getting that kind of stuff out. Getting your process as streamlined as possible. So That's an outgrowth. Lean Six Sigma is an outgrowth of these quality measures, and the government not taking ownership for your quality systems anymore. You now have to be responsible for quality systems. And so now what the government says is, you can do whatever you want. I want you to be Black Belt Six Sigma certified. And they impose that requirement on you to make sure that you have the processes in place to handle it. The government relies on contractors' internal quality processes to ensure conformance. And the language is much more in line now with your commercial practices. So you've had to do certain things to be able to stay competitive. If you, let's go back to our bell-shaped curve, right? Bell-shaped curve. You want your products to fall exactly here, because this is your standard, and this is what this is the standard, and this is the level that your customer is expecting. If you are producing a product that's over here, over here, over here, over here, those are products that are out of compliance. Each one of these products costs you money because you're paying for the raw materials and you're not being able to sell it. Now, you might be able to sell this one because it's really close and you might have a customer that's willing to take that product, but you're sure as heck isn't going to have a customer who will take a product over here or way over here, because that's not what they ordered from you. Or if they take it, you don't have that customer again. So that's the importance of these quality management standards and how they've been imposed back on us. Okay. Any questions about commercial items? With that, we'll turn to 16.
If that is your real name.
Feisty today. Get that man a woman.
I've got one, but don't tell her I've been. And she's the beer lady, but I just don't drink. I don't. She works for like a distributor for Anheuser-Busch.
Oh,
She
really?
have an older aunt or
Asking for a friend.
Yeah.
I did not just ask for somebody. Not for himself.
I don't know this smells. Let me get you the smells. Is it defined? VA outreach business?